Yeah, where I live now and lived then when I was very young, all the families had a plot of land or more, and they had animals and they had gardens and fruit trees. You could be self-sufficient and not have to go to the store for a month. If we had an extra plot of land. My father bought 2 building lots, what they called building lots, big enough to build a house on. So if you had 2 of them, you built a house on one, and you would use the other one for your garden.
This has a lot of fond memories. I got this when I went away to college.
On your way to college?
And when you go away to college, they pledge you for fraternities. And I got pledged for the Alpha Pi Omega fraternity.
Yeah.
And while we were pledging, it was, I think, a 6-week period. And we wore white pants, white shirt, and a white cap.
For 6 weeks?
With a bow tie, yep. And then we carried this paddle with us wherever we went. And we had to get our brothers to sign it. And you can see here all the signatures on here.
Oh, those are
And supposedly, whenever they signed it, you had to bend over and they'd wind up and give you a whack.
Wow.
That's most
That's
of them.
not fun.
No, but most of them were very good. And they hit very easily. I just said, give a yell and make believe I hit you.
That's true.
But it was very interesting.
But they didn't celebrate Halloween, so I used to always have my shtick was that, I was born on the 31st, but it wasn't Halloween. When I first came here, they had a Halloween party at school. And in those days, you'd go home half day to rest, supposedly. And then you'd come back that evening, and they'd be bobbing for apples, there'd be candy, there'd be donuts, there'd be sodas, there'd be... And I remember going in there thinking to myself, what a country, wow, this is gonna be great. When I looked at how many kids we had in the class, I thought it was a birthday party for me. And wait till the other kids have their party. What a country. Okay, so you had those kinds of when you realize, I gotta wait till next year to have another one.
I have a twin sister.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we were best of friends, and we did everything together. And I went to the Elms to college, and she had no desire to go to college, but we went together when we went out and all that. Yeah, and we were fraternal twins. Yeah.
Did you play any tricks on people growing up?
No, we didn't look alike, so you didn't do that. Oh, we would have loved to have done that.
Well, my grandmother used to make her own spaghetti because we were self-sufficient. We made our own bread. We canned all the vegetables. There was no freezing then. We canned all the vegetables, and all we had to do was go down the cellar. If we needed a chicken and we didn't raise them, we went down the street.
Right, and so what was dating like back then?
Terrifying.
Terrifying?
Yeah.
I can see that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've been through it. There's that awkward age when you're a boy. I imagine girls go through the same thing. I think they do, where you really want to get to know that girl standing across the room at the 8th grade dance. You'd love to go over and ask her to dance, but you're afraid. But I persisted, I'll say.
Yeah.
And eventually it was nice to be able to.
Right.
Children who were handicapped, and at least severely handicapped, were not in school.
Yeah.
There were no teachers' aides. There were no assistant superintendents. There were no assistant principals. There was very little busing. You had to be 2 miles away from the sound before you even thought about busing.
you didn't have the cars that you have today.
Yeah.
And so it was hard to get to places, and you didn't do all the things that you do today, you know, because you can't get there. And when I went to high school, it was on the other side of town, and so I always took the bus, you know, so for 4 years we did the bus, you know. And, but it was fun because you went with a group.
Yeah.
You know,
friends.
and so you knew them, and it was enjoyable. And then when you got there, you found so many others from different areas of the town or the city, and so that was fun too.
I don't know in our neighborhood. I can't name a dozen families, and in a way, it's kind of sad. But in the other way, well, I suppose that's the way it is today.
Yeah.
But in those days, everybody was pretty much watching out for everybody else, you know. And if my father would be, if there was somebody who was ill, usually it was the husband who took care of the yard and the wife took care of the laundry and stuff. Well, if one of the fathers on the street was sick, Dad would go over, mow the grass, take his guys over, clean it all up, you know, that kind of stuff. I'm sure it still happens today, but in those days it always made a big impression on me. Just let me know that I had a responsibility other than to my own family and the neighborhood.
What has traveling taught you over the years?
It's taught me that there's beauty everywhere in this universe, and that you're just such a little pebble because it's so immense. And people's cultures are different, and each one is very rewarding to see how people live and how they are accepting, and what you can do as just one person to influence the world. I mean, everybody gets up and everybody goes places, but it's a chance for you to have some influence and also to learn. It's a rewarding experience. That's about all I can say about it.
My own personal philosophy is that every right and privilege that we have probably carries a corresponding responsibility. We have the privilege of being citizens of the United States that carries the responsibilities to be mindful of what's happening with our government and our democracy and to vote. That's one. Of course, that comes to my mind because I said earlier, I'm kind of a political junkie.
Yeah.
Well, that you got to be honest, you got to work hard, don't cheat. And that was back at the time when we worked for one company, and you gave your best and you didn't slip around from one company to another.
I said the intolerance and acceptance of difference, because if you don't, you're not going to get along with people.
Yeah.
Because
You
people are
learn to
different.
adapt.
Why life is so complicated to people is really beyond me. Life is very simple if you don't take yourself so seriously. But if you take yourself seriously, you're going to suffer and suffer and suffer.
That mantra that I've always done, and that is, know you are loved. And I don't think enough people hear that. And when I have people, usually when I'm, goodbye is not goodbye, my generally is know you're loved.
Well, I think that one about when you decide what you want to do for your life, you better pick out something you like to do, because and I realized this later, but I was lucky enough to feel that way when I did that, when I picked that thing out, you know. And I think that that's probably one of the most important things you can do. I do.
What like life lessons has your work life taught you?
Boy, how much time do we have? Well, that's an excellent question. That's excellent. be true to yourself. Examine what you're doing and understand as best you can. When you don't understand, seek help. And don't just seek help from a friend or somebody like that. Seek help from experienced, talented, and credentialed people. Because if you're going to buy a business, you've got to know as much about that business as you can possibly know before you hand over your money and take the keys.
Well, volunteering is giving action. Did you receive anything from it?
Yes, you always receive when you volunteer. Makes you stronger, makes you more appreciative of the things you have.
I'm grateful for the things I was able to do. I'm grateful that I was able to serve. I'm grateful that the town was willing to take a chance on me. Remember, the only thing I walked into the MOB with that had anything to do with planning was a planning degree.
Yeah.
And the town took a chance on me. I'm grateful for that.
One of the reasons that I wasn't affected by the war is that when I was in college, we had the opportunity to, the draft was in effect. And we were subject to the draft even though we were in college, but those rules got changed so that if you were, you could elect to enter an ROTC program while you were in college, Reserve Officer Training Corps. I don't know if they still have that around.
Yeah, they do.
And you were permitted to complete your college. But at the end of college, you then served 2 years as a second lieutenant in the branch of your choice.
People say, "Are you retired?" I says, "I think I retired a long time ago. I just haven't worked a day in my life since." You got to do what you like. You got to, if you don't know what you're doing, then you got to learn how to do it right, and then you'll be fine. But there's a lot of opportunities out there. Retirement to me is always kind of, I always thought it would be a big thing. 65, I'm going to retire. Boy, I'm going to, you know. But you know, I found a lot of people that get to 65 and retire, and they take on a sedentary life, and then all of a sudden they got issues.
One of the reasons I remember wanting to be a Yank was when we were, after the war, you'd go to school and you would go through the pathways they made through the bombed out buildings. The bricks and stuff were all piled on the side. And you would go down into this basement of a building that was gone, and they would feed you. And they would always say to you, "This is from the Americans, this is from the Americans." And they would give you a tin plate, and you would get, and it would be, it was beyond how good it was. You always got a carton of milk, you always got a piece of fruit, and they used to walk you in, and there would be a lady sitting there, and she had a canister, and the tongue depressors that the doctor uses to look down your throat, she would take a tongue and stick it in, turn it, pick it up, and shove it in your mouth. And it was like honey, but it wasn't honey, like a Karo syrup. It was very sweet. And I didn't know then, I know now, they used to put all the vitamins and minerals that they would give you because you were so deprived of food, you know.
Who do you think of as the most important person in your life?
My mother, you know, she was very good. She was, we didn't have much, and she was very thrifty, but she made sure that we had everything. And then I think it had to be John after that, you know. Yeah. He was very good. And, you know, so I had taught, and so after we had a couple of kids, he wanted, he couldn't do 2 jobs, you know? And so he told me that if I stayed home with the kids, that everything, you know, he would take care of that. And he did. So whatever he was interested in or got involved in, he always made sure I went with him. You know, and I thought that was very nice, you know, because he had, you know, he had gone up to be fire chief, and then he was, one year he was president of the New England Chiefs and all that.
wow.
So we had
That's
gotten
great.
into that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and but he said, you stay home. He said, no, you know,
Yeah.
so.
It's such a sacrifice. My father graduated in 1914, I think it was. That was almost unheard of to find a man his age, and with his the restrictions that are put on black men. Women have a little easier time. My mother also finished normal school and was a school teacher. But my father, I'm sure it was very difficult for him. But he never complained about difficulties. He always felt that if you tried hard enough, you could do that. You could do it. That isn't true. Everybody cannot.
Because then the war was over, and if you, as I told you before, I think, if you had a husband that was working, you had to give up your job for a returning serviceman, make room for a serviceman, and that's how it was.
So when we finally did get married, we went to Father Connors, I think it was. He was a pastor, and he said, "How long have you known Edward?" He said. She said, 7 years. He said,
Wow.
It took him long enough to make up his mind, didn't it? Well, it was because I wanted to get an education.
That is a good choice.
Learn to
Very
walk
good
before
choice.
I could run,
Yeah.
which is the best advice I can give people.
What was the kind of like the happiest moment of your life?
Again, I had to think of that because there's a lot of happy ones, but I think probably the birth of my first son.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Being a woman, mother, I think that probably that was it.
Nice.
Yeah, mine was when we said I do.
But I said the most important thing is when you're having an argument with your spouse and you know you are correct and you are right, you've got to be willing to give in at least half the time. So that's how we stayed married. But I want to tell you that worked both ways with us. She knew that too. So we got along. That's how we stayed married.
We met dancing. We used to go to the YWCA on Sunday. I met a bunch of girls through a woman I worked with. It was actually her sister's crowd, but we hit it off. I learned to dance pretty good. I danced with some good dancers, and he came in one night, and the girls all that I knew all knew him. He eventually asked me to dance with him because he was pretty picky, and I made fun of him about that after. So, and about a year later, we got married.
What was the happiest moment of your life, you would say?
I guess it would have to be my wedding, you know, to get the pick of the crop. Yeah.
Nice.
Because he was wonderful to me, very
That's
good.
great.
He takes care of the kids and all that, you know.